Welcome to Straight Talk for Entrepreneurs, where we reveal what it really takes to build a successful business. Whether you are starting with an idea or growing your business, this is the show for you. My guests and I will show you how to build a strong mindset, a powerful body, a profitable business. Hi, I'm Brandon C. White, and this is Build a Business Success Secrets. So I think for our audience, well, I want to get to why you think venture capital is unfair. Not that you didn't know that like 40 years ago when you started, but how did you get started? Because I think, as you know, most people have this mystery. Venture capital is sort of this mystery that's a secret society or whatever it is of how it all works.
You know, I was, 1981, I worked for a small, all PhD company out in Seattle that came out of Boeing, and we solved the world's most difficult problems under contract from usually the Defense Department or the Department of Energy. And anyway, we decided to start making windmills, and we bought a license, started manufacturing them, and I got involved in it in terms of controlling the windmills. So I built the system that turned them on and turned them off and managed the power output. But I had a background in fluid mechanics, so I got to give the pitch to the investors about why they should invest. And I met this couple who managed someone else's money, and they said, yeah, we'd love to invest. We spend 6 months a year in San Francisco and 6 months a year in the Bahamas. And I just decided that sounded like the perfect kind of job for me. And so it took me 6 years from that date to get into venture business, but every decision I made was about getting there in terms of what I chose and what I did, because I knew I wanted to get on the finance side of technology. And I just, I volunteered for venture funds. I joined a bunch of startups. I probably still have the notes I wrote after that meeting with this couple. I just thought it was a lifestyle that just, and you know me, I still love the Bahamas.
So, but one step backward, just so I obviously have the background, but you were a dean of students at Duke before you came to Seattle for that startup, right?
No, this was straight out of school.
Oh,
After
straight out of
PhD,
school.
I went to Seattle, and I worked on Russian submarines, torpedoes. Then I got in the wind energy business, and I ended up spending a lot of time on Wall Street, pitching the investment groups to raise funds to cover the cost. And there were incredible tax incentives back then, particularly in the state of California. So I ended up buying a gray suit, and then I used to go to Water Street and pitch the the bankers. And when they had a technical question, I was technical enough to, answer it. So
this is after you got your PhD.
Yeah.
So do you remember the couple's name?
I don't, but I have the paper somewhere in my office that I wrote on a little flip pad I said, this is the best balance for me. It's super technical. It's lifestyle. It's working with super smart people. It's working, with the construction. It was everything I loved. It was just sounded like a great job. So
how'd you get to San Francisco from Seattle?
I was working for a startup company out of Minneapolis that was building a very high-speed computer, and to get the speed up, they actually immersed the circuit boards in liquid nitrogen. And there was a conference in Reno every year where all the people who ran the biggest computer programs in the world showed up. I used to go, and I met this guy named Steve Blank, who was a serial entrepreneur, and he hired me to come work for his company, Ardent Computer, in Sunnyvale in, I guess about 1986. So I went to work there and learned about the startup business. He taught me everything I know about that. And I was one of the techies that traveled around the world helping them sell boxes. So that's how I got to San Francisco.
How'd that startup turn out?
It floundered for a long time just because it was a very competitive market. We had a big Japanese investor, Kubota, who makes farm equipment who thought they wanted to get in the computer business, and they funded the company, eventually bought it. But by that time, I'd already left to join another startup called Key Computer, which was spun out of Lawrence Livermore Labs, and it was funded by Merrill Pickard and Mayfield. And I'd done work for both of those firms before, while I was at Art reviewing deals for them.
So you go to this company. How long do you stay there? And this, now you're in the Valley, though. You're in Silicon Valley at this point.
Yeah, I'm living in Palo Alto and going to work. We were there for a year. Then we got acquired by Amdahl, which was the IBM clone mainframe maker. Really super company. And I lasted about 6 months. Then I got recruited by Sequoia to join the firm.
Well, how'd that happen? Because a lot of people don't understand how you get recruited for any venture firm, much less Sequoia.
They had a recruiter, and that they hired to look for a new partner, and a new associate. They had hired an associate every year, and I was the fourth associate in the last one they hired for 10 years. And so the first was Mike Moritz, then Doug Leone, then Mark Stevens, and then they hired me. And they used the same recruiter every year. And his secretary had done a quick stint at Key Computer, and she suggested that he interview me as a possible associate for Sequoia. So that's how I got in the door. And then the interview process took 6 months before they decided.
Was your first interview with Don Valentine, or was that with somebody else?
The first interview was with Pierre Lamont. I didn't see Don till toward the end, and that was after the recruiter interviewed me. But I do remember when I reviewed my resume with sitting at Don's, God rest his soul, little table. He said, you really are a selfish man. And I was sort of taken back by it. And he said, no, that's a good thing in our business.
What do you think he saw in your resume that he gleamed that?
I think I was a quick study, and I think one of my real skills by being a systems engineer is being able to pattern recognition, to take a lot of data in and put all the pieces together, and come up with a hypothesis or a thesis for investing, or in the case of my graduate work, how to solve a problem that was never solved before. So the training was really good. I'd worked for Steve Blank. I'd been in academics. I had a lot of broad technical training, and I had sort of a smidgen of business exposure, and he was happy I didn't have any more. Like it would have been a liability if I'd had an MBA, I think, in this case, because they look for someone really technical to sort out some of their investment themes.
So it's fair to say you really weren't interviewing, you were having conversations with multiple partners and associates over 6 months, or how did that go?
I interviewed everybody, some of them twice. So the associates and all the partners, there were 5 partners. Yeah. There was no easy entry into that firm. Like I said, they would think about it for a month and then call you back and say, hey, we'd like to talk to you again. It was.
So they had 5 partners, because Sequoia was still relatively, compared to what they are today, small, right?
Back then, people only did one thing back then. That was they raised capital. They had 4 or 5 partners and staff, and all you did was find a deal, invest, and work it. Now it's a fully vertically integrated business, which I think is the real, and it's changing rapidly in the US, and that's something to talk about today. So yeah, just 5 guys. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that was it.
5 total people. That includes, so that's Don, Pierre, Mike, Doug, and Steve? No,
it was Gordon Russell, Tom Stevenson, Gordon Russell, Tom Stevenson, Pierre Lamont, Don Valentine, and there was another partner. His name is David. I forgot his last name, but he was a venture partner. So they were all the senior guys. And then I did interview with the associates, and I said, how do you determine whether you're successful if you work here? Because I had no idea what
they
success
say.
looked make money. And it says it'll take you 5 years to find out if you're any good at it. You got to go the full cycle from investing to either liquidity or failure to really know whether you can find deals, bring them in, diligence, close them, work them, and exit them. You know, you had to do all 5 steps to become a partner. And that was the.
So you got the job.
Yeah.
And how long were you an associate before you became a partner?
3 years. Then
And
we raised Sequoia Capital 6, and I became a partner along with Doug, Mike, and Mark. So all 4 associates moved up to partner status.
And did any partners leave in Sequoia 6?
Gordon, Pierre, and Don were not managing partners. They got a big piece of the carry because we had to pay off the franchise fee, but they didn't want the liability of working with us because they had done Cisco and Sequoia 5, and they had all sort of got to where they felt really comfortable with what they could do next and didn't feel much need for money. So just the 4 of us, and Tom Stevenson, who had worked at Fidelity for 20 years, was the 5th partner, and it was our baby. So we raised just 100 million and went to work.
So let's talk about, I know you have some good stories about Yahoo and a bunch of other stuff, but can we talk about how venture capital really works? Because I think that, and you taught me this, 22 years ago, but how it actually functions, because there's this, entrepreneurs see venture capitalists as people who just have this checkbook, right? And that's the quote unquote allure, because you can get rich. The truth is not all companies match venture capital, and venture capital unto itself actually does have a boss. So can you talk about, I know you went through the fundraising process in Sequoia 6, how that really, how it actually works?
There's, well, the business is very simple. There's 5 steps to a successful investment, and in $100 million fund, you might have 20 investments, and so you need 5 of those to be successful, and the other 15 can all fail, but you can still make the returns and make your limited partners the money they want to make, and then be able to raise another fund and come back for it again. But there's five simple things. Excuse me. You have to be able to raise money. You got to be able to create a deal flow and get into the best deals that are happening in your segment. And there's only about 10 or 20 real deals done in the US that become multi-billion-dollar players. So you had to really be able to see as many deals as you could. The third is you got to be able to do the diligence and decide whether to invest or to walk from it. And that's another set of skills. The 4th one is managing CEO, helping hire, fire, strategy, help them raise additional rounds. You got to get them, you got to build the company out. And you do play a role in that. It's very specialized, but you do. And then the 5th is exits, whether it's an IPO or an acquisition. You got to do all 5 of those things well to be a full partner in a firm. It's not like people get specialized, like, hey, I only do diligence. That you might hire an associate for that, or I only do exits. I mean, everybody has to do all 5. You got to be to really have a strong firm.
But you go to, let's step back just one, I want to unpack it a little bit. You go to endowments and retirement funds, and they allocate a portion of their investment portfolio to venture capital and a bunch of other stuff.
Typically, we never did pension funds because they have set of regulations about public disclosure. So it's principally university endowments and foundations that you work, and they have much more leeway. And so they'll typically allocate 5% of their endowment. So if you go to the Ford Foundation or Harvard or MIT, they'll have 5% that goes into venture, and they just allocate that out to maybe 20 firms. And so they make that investment, then they have a big chunk of public stocks, they have bonds, they have real estate, they have timber, oil and gas, and all the other asset classes, trying to blend out all the ups and downs of a global economy, doing that. So you try to find investors who are in for the long run, who believe in what you're saying and don't ask a lot of questions.
So how do the economics for the venture fund work?
Typical on a $100 million fund, typically it's called a 2 and 20. So you take a 2% management fee every year to pay to operate the fund. That pays your salaries, your space, your travel, all your operating expenses for that. So in a $100 million fund, you take $2 million a year, and over 10 years, you take 20 of that as fees into the partnership, which means you only got 80 to invest. And if you say you make an investment of $1 million and it returns 100 million, then it's the general partners take 20%. So the investors would get the 80 million and the partnership would get the 20 million. So 2 and 20, 2% fee, 20% profit sharing. And typically that's only after you've paid back the original capital to the investors.
Right. So you have to get over that $100 million hurdle before you as the partnership get to participate in that 20% of the upside.
Yeah, we didn't do it that way, but most firms do.
No, I know you guys were special. You taught me about this thing. Actually, if you remember, we were talking to Bob Finzi, who used to be a partner at Sprout, and there's this thing called a clawback.
Yeah.
And that gets ugly, right?
Yep.
What happened?
Yeah, basically if you lose money down the road, you have to repay it. And I do remember times when I wrote a $1 million check back to the limited partners for accumulated losses on the series of deals. So it's a pretty fair, I mean, given the returns are what they are, it's a pretty fair structure, and you need the fees to run the operation.
But I think there's this perception that sometimes, I mean, you always told me being a venture capitalist is great business. I mean, greatest job in the world, which I think being an entrepreneur is as well. However, I think there's this belief out there that venture capitalists have this free ride, and that's actually not true. If they lose money, they lose money too, individually.
Yes, anytime our limited partners lost money, I lost my share of that money, because we put up our own. We basically put up the 20 million. We put up our part, which is, I guess it's only 1%, so it wasn't very much, but yeah, I don't think that. I mean, there's a lot of things you can worry about in the venture business or any investment firm, but the real underlying thing is if you're an entrepreneur, is how do you figure out who you want to work with and what they can bring to the party and what the experience is going to be like. So there's all kinds of structures for venture partnerships, but in the end, they don't really affect the entrepreneur very much.
No, I just wanted to demystify that venture capitalists have this free ride and they get all this money and they've got Falcon jets, which are nice, and all this stuff, but that they don't have recourse. And the recourse is, and the reason that they're so stringent, and where I'm going with it is, the reason the selection process is so hard is because the returns have to be incredible for them to make money. And two is their wallet is on the line.
Right. It's not a free ride. You couldn't get rich. You can't get rich being a partner in a firm. You only get rich if you hit home runs. Singles and doubles, you don't get rich. You got to hit it out of the ballpark to have a Falcon jet. So yeah.
Right. And going back what you said earlier, if you make 20 investments, you know that some of those are going to die, and you need 5, 2, 1 to really hit the jackpot to pay back the fund.
Yeah. So if you say you invested the 80 million and half the companies failed, then you've already lost 40 million. So that 40 million you have to turn into 200 million to get a 2x return on capital, which is a 5x return on the actual invested capital. So it's a very pressured job. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's being lucky is such a small part of it. It's more about just being in the right place at the right time and doing the work. There's no shortcuts in this business.
And in many ways, you have to build this. I mean, for many reasons, I moved to Silicon Valley, but it's a real engine. And you always said that to me, this place and other regions have tried and they may achieve it someday, but it really takes a full engine for a company and a venture capital firm to really make real money.
Yeah. So, and those are two separate things. So let's talk about a few companies that really didn't need any venture capital help to become very successful. And the first one would be Cisco. They were, when they started, they were two Stanford computer science technicians who figured out a way to make computers talk to each other. And they were shipping, I think the first $1 million of revenue they shipped out of their garage. And they needed help sort of growing, but they had already found the product. It was basically a software company that needed a little metal box with some circuit boards to run the software. But that was a really easy business and it scaled up. And I think we put in 2 million and I think we took off like 4 billion. We distributed $4 billion. So that was a really big hit.
Let's just say that again.
We put in 2 million and it was only invested capital in the company and we distributed to our limited partners 4 billion. Yeah.
And the company took off because it had.
Oh, yes. Because it was in the right place at the right time. They turned into a franchise company. And for us, as part of the Cisco network, we use them for diligence on any companies, and we probably invested in 7 or 8 networking companies that half of them Cisco bought, the other half other companies bought, but it was a slam dunk from day one because Cisco said if they can do that, we'd pay $250 million for them. So. And as long as the company hit its product, they didn't really have to sell much. They didn't even have to have a long product pipeline. They just had to get the first base and the company was worth, $500 million or something.
So in that case, right time, right product at a time when
steep market. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You could say that same way about Clubhouse that Andreessen Horowitz just invested in, north of $1 billion valuation. If you look what that product does, it's like, holy shit, this thing is going to be worth, 50 or 100 billion.
Well, let's talk about a different one that I know you have. Let's talk about Yahoo, because they were sort of the right time, right? But you guys invested.
Were first. Yes, they were first.
So how'd that happen with you guys finding them, and how did they use that capital? And did they even need the capital in many cases? Because I think you did a few rounds in that, right?
So that's another. Yahoo is another network effect. Sequoia had been an investor in Apple back in the early days, and then when Steve Jobs got kicked out of Apple and started his next computer company, he came to us looking to raise money, and we passed. But there was a guy who had come out of Adobe who was going to build Microsoft Office for the next box. And so we thought that had a lot of promise if the next box took off. That's a long story why it didn't, but it was just one person pretty much killed that company. Anyway, we invested, next didn't make it. We lost our $2 million, and the founder of the software company said, "I'm really sorry I lost your money. There's 2 guys over in the trailer at Stanford, and I think they're doing the most amazing stuff I've ever seen. You should go see them." So Mike Moritz had gotten the call. He'd also lost the 2 million. We all jumped in his Mercedes station wagon and buzzed down there. And there were these 2 kids, David Philo and Jerry Yang. And we just said, we're investing. We didn't even have approval from all the partners, but we said, we're in for 750. And that's how I got started. And for the first year, Those guys lived at the Sequoia offices. They stole all the chairs out of the conference room for their meetings and out of our offices, and they drank all the coffee, and we finally threw them out and said, get your own place. And so they took off. It was just, they were the first. There were several other players out there, but they were ahead of everybody else.
And one of the things for entrepreneurs listening to this is, at that point, once you see a company taking off, you're going to pour gas on it with more money to help it continue and make sure it stays in the lead, right? Isn't that part of the model?
In the old days around Cisco, the answer was no. They had enough. They were profitable every year of their existence because that's just the way it worked. In the case of Yahoo, yes, but not terribly yes, because the internet was driven by other people who didn't work for the company creating the network, and you didn't pay them. They just signed on and used Yahoo Search or the Yellow Pages or whatever, and then they, Yahoo Mail, Yahoo Finance, all the other pieces to it. So as long as the users are creating the value and the mass that's really valuable, then it's really inexpensive. Same would be for WhatsApp or Snapchat or some of these other ones. What really happens when you have to pour it on is when you're doing those enterprise software companies where you have to front load everything, and you do have to raise money, massive amounts of money to get the customers on board, right? And you have to get up to where you get the critical mass and credibility in a stable product to grow the business. So the best ones are the ones where the users create the value. Same with Yahoo, the same with Facebook, Google. That's why they're all worth as much as they are, and why they control so much of the planet right now.
Do you think that other types of businesses, hardware businesses, product business, consumer product, GoPro types, do you think those companies have the same potential as tech does today? Or do you think that tech is really software, that's media, that sort of stuff?
I was an investor in a company called Translock, and it was a micro transit company started in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'd lost money on the founder's previous deal. And he called me up, and I think it was Salesforce invested, I invested in one other firm. And they had a product where they had to install a box on top of every bus in the city or on a university campus. And then the software ran and told them when they should move the buses around, where they should go. And they guaranteed like 30 or 40% cost savings for the customer. So, and it was very successful, and it was a very intensive pilot, install, test, train. In the end, they got bought 2 years ago by Ford at a very nice multiple, Ford Mobility, because they were an underlying piece of how to manage a city built on mass transit, because they had put the work in. So, no, it wasn't a unicorn, but they went through all the steps, and it was a long process, and everyone made some good money, and it was a very successful business. And they still are a foundation part of Ford's expansion into sort of inner city transit.
So they were a software hardware. Do you think I just throwing this out there because I believe in general that tech, given where we are in evolution or society or whatever, it's tech and media that really are going to be where exponential growth. There's space and there's all these other interesting things out there. But if you were going to build a clothing company, for example, that's a different model. It's very hard to scale that quickly, right? It's a different type of thing.
It's got really different fundamentals because because you can build a clothing company, you can build a food company, and what you have is that ability for design or whatever, and probably the barriers to creating the product aren't as large as some other businesses. The problem is going to scale, and the problem is always the requirement to build inventory to sell through a set of retail outlets or something, particularly for clothes. So most of those companies, a few of them make it. Most of them screw up the inventory and get bought. So I think it's a really hard business to be in unless you've got some revolutionary thing like Impossible Foods or Beyond Meat or some of those that the market opportunity is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And then you get the big guys like the big chicken companies and the beef companies coming in and investing. And if you produce something of value, they will just take you out for a good multiple.
Can you talk a little bit about the types of companies that venture capitalists look for and what fits that model? Because not every, we talked about a little bit here, but like when you look at a company, what are you looking for that fits the venture model that can give you that return?
Okay, it's a good question. So the first is there's really if it's a startup company, there's really 5 things. So the first one would be it's got to have address a big market. It's got to be billions plus. So if the company does everything well, it could have hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. So it can't just be a little niche product. It's got to have a wide thing, like say Beyond Meat. Like I said, I don't know what meat sales are on a global basis, but it's probably $50-100 billion a year. The second is you got to have a product that's differentiated. It's got to be competitive. There can't be anything else like it. It's got to be defensible either by intellectual property or that's your first and you can outrun everybody else. And it could be a service as well. Third is just having the team in place, or at least people to have the founders to have real insight into what's really going in the marketplace and what it's going to take to take this product to market, to pivot if it's not quite right, and to have the perseverance and talent to make that happen. The fourth is it just can't take too much money. Depending on the size of your fund, if you got $100 million fund, you just can't be you can't do a company that takes $400 million of capital, because you'll get washed out down the road because you can't keep up. I say the fifth one's the most important thing for startup people is you need to find a partner that you really want to work with. That if you're doing a seed round, if you find a seed fund that's going to invest in you, you're going to be living with your investor for 5 to 6, 7, 8 years. And it's not like they go away. They're in it. So you got to like the people and feel like you can work with them. And I was reading something from Kleiner Perkins, and one of the younger guys went through these 5 things. And I think if you look back in 1990, they were the same. The underlying things have not changed to make a successful business.
No, I think you taught me people, product, same thing, but it was people, product, financing,
team, and
market.
Then finance. Yeah, if someone's doing a biotech thing, it's going to take $1 billion. Like I said, if you're a giant fund, maybe take that on, but you're a $40 million seed fund, you can't play in that game. The later rounds will wash you out.
You've talked about over the years the people. So, and I know there were some stories. I don't know we want to talk about that one. The guy was a criminal or whatever. But what do you look for in the psyche of the entrepreneur, either solo founder or co-founder team? What are you really looking for in that person as it relates to a venture investable company?
Well, some people just have the drive and the passion, and just the wherewithal, the intelligence to sort of be able to keep, they can work down the ground to build out the product, but they can also go up 30,000 feet and see where the company's going and where the competition's going, and as well as manage the team. So it's a broad set of skills to be a great founder, CEO. And I would say on the technical side, I think that's why the venture firms have moved into the talent business to help train up their founders to stay a CEO and not get replaced by an operating person, move to chairman or CTO or something else. So you got to do all these things well. The best founders are ones who, there's two types of founders. I'll give you an example. There's a founder who has worked at, say, a semiconductor company and worked there for 10 years, trained, brought products to market, done design work, done production, service, and everything. And in that case, there's a guy named Jensen who showed up from LSI Logic to Sequoia, and he wanted to start a gaming company and build the chipsets. And he called the company NVIDIA. And he knew everything that he needed to know to build that chip and take it to market. And the only thing he needed to learn how to do was build a team around him to help in finance. He didn't need much in marketing because the chips are so far ahead. I mean, he knew almost everything because he had spent those 10 years. If you're a technical founder and you come up with something that's just, you've never worked in industry or something, you need more help, and you're going to need to find a venture firm that can also help find co-founding other partners or something to build out the team that you have enough skill to get the product to market. So there's different kinds of founders. Clearly, someone like Jensen at NVIDIA was, it took a long time for that stock to take off, but 20 years later, he still leads the category, and he's a dominant force in gaming and computing.
And then what would be the other type of founder who doesn't work in industry for that long?
Oh, I think like Jerry Yang and David Filo, they were just grad students at Stanford that said, "Hey, man, we should just build a Yellow Pages for the internet and just search all these things and put it all together so people can look them up without having to, because and it was a really simple idea, but they went through 2 or 3 CEOs at different stages of building to help them build out, because they never had any real interest in really becoming the CEO. They were really enamored with the product and the technology and in the marketplace, what was going on, because it was such a time of innovation and change, whether it was Netscape or all the other companies that came into that space in the mid 90s before the crazy times began.
So you and I talked about this. There was a piece, I forget who wrote it, from Andreessen Horowitz years ago about replacing founders as CEOs, and should CEOs be replaced at all, unless they obviously lose their mind or something. And there's different approaches and philosophies. I feel like over the years, the venture business has adopted that the founder should be the CEO and drive it. And there's been examples. Steve Jobs was one, right, where he got fired, and clearly you can't just hire a CEO and bring him into Apple, and Apple almost goes out of business. And then there's the guys over at Google who took a break, and actually Jerry, I think, through some of those at Yahoo, Tim Kugel and a bunch of other guys were in there in between. And then Jerry came back, and then ultimately Jerry was fired by whoever. And then ultimately Yahoo took a dip, it got sold, and you could make an argument whether they're successful or not. I'm biased as a founder, so I tend to believe that founders should stay CEOs. And I think Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook is a good example of how to backfill yourself with an operator while still driving the vision. What do you think about all that?
Oh, I think in the old days when it was a partnership of 5 guys and a bookkeeper, an accountant, and some staff, we didn't really have the resources that we never made the investment because of the fund size and the resources to build out talent. We relied on recruiters and that. And as the business grew, I think we realized the founders need to stay longer, and be trained up or backfilled or whatever. And then that's when, like Andreessen Horowitz or something, they hired their in-house recruiter. They have their training people and stuff. So when the venture firms went fully integrated, the idea was, the founder is the blood and the vision for the company, and keeping that person in the CEO spot is essential. So we got to train them on what they don't know and backfill them with people who complement their skill sets to build a fully integrated company that can go the distance. So it was more just the venture business matured and understood that vertical integration, like in any industry, was essential to sustain yourself through over a long period of time.
Well, I think that's a interesting insight, because I think entrepreneurs got angry in those early days that they were going to get fired and get replaced. But really, as I listened to you, it was really a function of the venture firm's capability to actually integrate. It wasn't that that's all the resources they had. And I think you said, so there were 5 of you at Sequoia you guys didn't have a ton of resources back then. And most firms didn't, in fact, right?
Right. There were just some recruiters you worked with. And then when a company broke, for some reason, something broke or didn't change, time's a killer on investing and also on companies. And we tried to fix things fast. We couldn't take 6 months and sort of wait and try to fix the product or fix the team, or, just see if the VP of engineering could actually deliver the product. You fix things fast because you're burning your capital, you're burning the team's capital, and the long term, the only outcome if you did move fast was dilution of everybody's stake, founders, team, and investors. So we just, like I said, that was as good as we could do. And as the funds got bigger and we had more resources, they slowly built out to where there are these fully integrated, and I don't even think the venture firms are even close to being fully integrated today of what they're going to be in the next 5 or 10 years. So it was just a necessity, and
it wasn't an insult against entrepreneurs. It was merely a function of the business model and the time.
Yeah, the entrepreneurs still had their founder's stake in the company. If they got demoted and they hired a CEO, the idea was it's going to be win-win-win. It was a win for the founder, it was a win for the team, and it was a win for the investors. It wasn't. He says, if I can't fix this and you can't help me fix it, we got to get someone from the outside. Else my entire stake and all the team, we all lock the front door, throw the keys in the mailbox, and go home. It's over. So the idea in the venture business is for it to be a win-win-win business. And that's the only way it works successfully. And that win is really between the company, its customers, and venture back would be its investors. So the company does include the founder and the team. Customers got to get value. All those three, it's got to be win-win-win, or else it doesn't work.
So what do you think about other business types? Meaning I believe, right, the venture business depends on entrepreneurs. Without entrepreneurs, there's no venture business. So the venture industry has used media and propagated the idea that if you don't get venture capital or you get turned down, then you're some way a subpar business citizen, if that's a way to say it. But that's not really true, right? I mean, there's a lot of people, and I know you have an interest in lifestyle businesses for people who, maybe they do 3 million and they throw off $1 million a year. I mean, that's a good lifestyle, right? It's not the only way to build a business is venture capital. What do you think?
Well, I would say, Brandon, the big thing has been venture capital has changed. And I think people like Techstars that started these accelerators and now run, I don't know, 70 or 80, I'm an investor in one of their funds around the world. I'm talking about Berlin, Paris, John Deere and Company. They run, Techstars runs one at Amazon headquarters. It's to basically bring anyone with entrepreneurial ideas, interests, and some of the basic skill sets to be trained how to do it, the steps that you learn how to do it, and also be vetted and tested against your product market fit. So it has changed, and I think for the last since about 2000, I think Steve Case from the Case Foundation and AOL has been another proponent. I mean, it's been a tremendous amount of global effort to engage entrepreneurs at all levels in all communities, from agriculture to finance to food to health and education. So the ecosystem is very robust these days in terms of, if you have an idea, you can find a path forward and get a lot of support and some initial funding, and have your shot.
Regardless of doesn't have to be a rocket ship anymore necessarily.
No, I don't think so. No one. I mean, there's. So just as here's a statistic that I looked up today before we had this call. Andreessen Horowitz has 325 active portfolio companies today. You want to give me an estimate of how many of those are public companies? 325. How many are public?
How many out of all of that? So that's 325 portfolio companies.
How many of those are public? Yeah.
Well, I'd probably say 5.
14. Okay.
Still low, yeah.
Yeah. How many have been acquired by other corporations? Any guess?
100.
60. So that means, look at the odds of the, and they still have, after that, the 14 IPOs currently and 60 acquisitions, they still got 250 companies that are still out there going away, no exit. So it's much more likely that you'll build something and you'll build a smaller company and it'll be acquired and scaled up by another company. And Andreessen Horowitz doesn't just do IPO companies. They've got 60 companies that got bought. So that's that's actually a core part of the business, is acquisitions, because the IPOs are much more dependent on global economics and a lot of the factors that VCs and the companies have absolutely no control over. So yeah, you can build smaller companies, things, and get acquired if you want, or just stay the course and build out a company that has a great cash flow and live the dream.
So here's one a question that there's this whole proliferation on the internet, and there's a movement, especially among millennials and whatever other generation, that everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, right? It has this cool cachet, and it is a cool lifestyle. It's super hard. And I actually find it, and there's also some people out there that say anybody can be an entrepreneur, anybody can do it. Now, some of those people are selling products that they're biased towards, but I personally find it insulting, because I think that would be like saying to a venture capitalist, anybody can be a VC and be successful, or, I could easily do that. I don't think that, and this gets down to, can you teach entrepreneurship? I think is a different question. I think you can teach entrepreneurship, but can you teach someone to be an entrepreneur, or do they just have this? Are they born with it, or can you teach it?
Okay, so that's a complex question.
well, I didn't want it to be easy.
Politically correct. I think everyone can learn entrepreneurial skills, and I think if you're a line engineer at Ford Motor Company and they're going to go to all electric vehicles in 15 years, you can go outside the box of what you've always done and suggest and design and try to educate other people in your team or your boss or the head engineering manager how to do something better, make the car bring more value and functionality to the customer for less cost. So there's a lot of layers in there. If you're going to start a standalone company, put your life savings and make your family invest and max out your credit cards, I would say that you better have some skills.
Well, the skills are they innate?
You gotta be, yes. Yeah, we backed a company called Shaman Pharmaceuticals, and this was a company that their products were found by going in the jungles of South America and living with the indigenous tribes and finding out the plants that they used to treat various diseases. And then they were going to harvest the plants and bring them back and sell them as pharmaceuticals in the US. And that woman was amazing. She maxed out like 6 credit cards. And she went down there, and it was the craziest idea in the world, particularly the videos of living in these straw tents. But the company made it, went public, got acquired later with its product pipeline. And that was a business that you had to be a real friggin' engineer to do.
You invested.
Yeah.
So you can't, I mean, you can't teach that, right? I mean, I don't even understand. And
Lisa, that woman, she just had a feeling. She said, I know how to do that. I mean, it's like that was way out there, because I think she had 2 little kids and a husband, and we're like, wow, girl, we were in awe, and we invested because the business was sound. But it was like, holy shit, what a way to build a company, you know? And they wouldn't tell them what plants they're using until they lived in the village for 6 weeks. So,
well, I gotta, you said something, you're like, oh, I want to be politically correct. Like, I'm not, I mean, I try to be as politically correct as possible, but by the same token, the truth is not everybody can do every job. You're not entitled.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
Yeah. Oh, let's take Tony Hsu. He just died recently, right? He started Zappos, right? Before that, he did Link Exchange, where we invested, and Microsoft bought it for $250 million in 3 years. That guy was bipolar as hell, manic, never stopped, super smart, worked all day and all night, and medicated himself. In the end, it caught up to him after he got fired from Amazon for being drunk at Amazon functions to the public. So there's some crazy people that are incredible. Nothing
but it takes that, right? Like that's why it's insulting me. It's super hard. I mean,
I think everybody, I think we could, even in government, I think even in the nonprofit world, I think teaching people how to not just do what they're told, but do what they think might make a difference is a great training to have. And the level of execution by those people, it does vary. And there's clearly a bright line between who gets venture funded and who doesn't. And that's because when you get up to that level, you're playing pro ball. And you know what the attrition is from junior high, middle school football to the pros. It's 1,000 to 1 or something. It's no different than that.
Right. Yeah. And I agree. I think you can teach, I could teach entrepreneurship skills to people, but can I teach the 14-hour day that you got to put in, and the stress of your credit card payment? Or, I mean, that's sort of something that you probably need to be a little bit crazy.
Well, let's go back to my earlier thing. There's certain people that have worked in industry and done 90% of what it takes to run a startup, like Jensen from NVIDIA. He'd done all the jobs. He had moved up 10 years. He said, I want to build this next chip. And the company said, we're not in the gaming business. So he leaves and starts a company, leaving from where he took off from. LSI Logic was the company. Those guys, that's a different business model as opposed to someone just comes up and says, hey, I've got a better way to you've got to be some basis for you wanting to start that company. You got to feel like you know something someone else doesn't know, or you figured something out. So the market's self-selective. It always works out in the end. I mean, the best companies grow and get big, and the weak companies usually fade over time. So
what questions do you think an entrepreneur should ask a venture firm when they are a lot of times entrepreneurs don't do this. They go to the venture firm, they pitch the venture firm, they never ask the venture firm questions because entrepreneurs believe that the money is the ticket to make their idea a success. So I think they forget that.
Depends on the type of entrepreneur you are.
Well, so if I was going to come into you for venture to make, and you're at a venture firm, you're retired now, but well, you actually had another venture firm, which we can talk about, but what questions should an entrepreneur ask any venture fund when they sit down with them to really interview them? I'm going back to what you said earlier, which is, or way back earlier in our conversation when you said, if you go do business with a venture capitalist, and you always told me this, you're getting married. Like they're not going away.
Yeah, unless it'll be an ugly divorce. Yes.
Right. It doesn't, I mean, if it ends, it's
expensive.
So what if you were in an entrepreneur's shoes, knowing what you know about venture capital, what would you suggest they ask?
Oh, there's probably three things that you really need to know. It's like, I just want to know what other companies like mine you've worked with and how you describe your working relationship. How did you resolve issues with the founders and the team? And what were the biggest challenge, what were the biggest challenges that you as an investor faced in a business similar to what I'm trying to start? The second would be is, who do you know in this space? Who do you know in the other venture firms that invest? Who do you know on the exit side that likes this business? I mean, what's your value added down the road? And the third is just more personality. Do we get along? Can we go out, eat lunch, and talk about our kids? That marriage side of it. So there's a lot of dimensions to having a strong partnership, and also having a skilled player on your team. And you need to figure that out before. You don't want someone who's never, you don't want an investor that's never done a deal anywhere near your space or at your stage, or it's not solved the kind of problems that are essential in this business.
What's the hardest question that you always ask an entrepreneur when you're going to invest? Because I know you have several.
Oh, let's see. Probably the biggest one is, what do you worry about? It's just a character test. It's like, what do you worry about? What do you worry about on Saturday afternoon at 4:00 about your business? What's that persistent thing? And what is it? Is it solvable? Is it because of you? Is it because of the industry? Is it because of you just want to know, like, what do you worry about? That's just a classic question.
What would be is there any one thing that you hear from a potential entrepreneur or a business that you might invest in that as soon as you hear it, you're like, okay, I don't care, I'm out?
Oh, if they said we're not sure, I worry that we can't make the product work. There you're dead in the water. So, I mean, and part of seed investing is you don't always know whether the product's going to work when you put in your seed money. So he's got to say, if the entrepreneur said, if this doesn't work, I've got 3 other avenues we can pivot and work on to get a product acceptable to the market on which we can build a real business. But if it was like a crapshoot flip, you just go, we're not doing this. That's a risk I'm unwilling to take for my investors' money.
So what are you doing now in venture capital?
I work for a seed fund, and they focus in climate, food, education, fintech, and energy. And so I'm advising them on a wide range of issues about just from my past experience in the business. And then I'm involved in a climate fund that deals with public market securities and that operates out of New York City. So climate focus is probably a key for mine, and investing, again, food, energy, education, I don't really do much in fintech.
You think there's
So
money to be made in all those things because of the place we are in history on this sort of pivotal moment, so to speak, where oil starts to,
yeah, I mean, we were big investors in Bog Warner, and that's a big Detroit company, but they make all the transmissions for electric vehicles. So sometimes it's not investing in Tesla, although we have been investors in Tesla. It's investing in some of the pioneering subsystems that will go in every electric car, no matter who builds it. You know, I think those have really big businesses. I think a lot of water treatment, because water is going to be in short supply. It needs to be managed tighter. It needs to just water supplies in general. There's a lot of topics in the climate area that aren't. They're not talking about trying to stop ocean acidification. They're about technical solutions to solve problems that communities, cities, and governments have to solve. And those are your customers. And you're trying to, you know, it's a new lower cost, less power intensive membrane to desal water. Huge. Would be a huge breakthrough if you could cut the power requirement by 10 to desal water in terms of energy usage, whether it's oil and gas, solar, you know, whatever.
you think there's a real movement in the world right now for this? I was reading an article the other day, and there's been this whole thing that companies have to have a social responsibility component, or that society doesn't necessarily want to support them, going to support them.
No, I think it's got to be. I think that's the whole thing. I think the social thing is the soft thing. I mean, let's just go to another example. So Starbucks, and people go, you know, Starbucks buys a lot of coffee. You know, they actually run a major research facility in Costa Rica, and they are trying to understand the impact of climate change for coffee growers. And I think they may have, like, you know, 250,000 coffee growers around the world. They're actually trying to solve the problem to teach all them how to keep their family and small scale businesses going and not suffer the consequences of climate change, if in fact they're going to be severe. So there's a lot of, I mean, that's just good business, right? That's nothing social about that. You could say clearly has a social benefit. Anheuser-Busch has got over 500,000 suppliers, and they're trying to teach every one of them how to grow hops and everything for half the amount of water they currently use. Which, again, it's a win-win-win. Okay, and I think those are the real. It's good for the people. It's good for the company. It's good for the planet. And if it's all good on there, investors are going to make money, and everybody's going to have a long career and better health. You know, everything works out. So no, the social thing is just politically correct. I mean, there are plenty of companies doing the right thing right now at global scales that are going to make the world a better place today and down the road.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I have one last question that I didn't prepare you for, but I know you'll be able to answer, which is 3 HPTs, high percentage tips for entrepreneurs who are building companies from all of your years of seeing incredible success. And, well, you've seen incredible success. You've seen some two-basers, and you've seen carnage. So what would you give advice for entrepreneurs who are looking to start, grow, and build, and ultimately maybe sell companies?
That's a good one. Right, you didn't warn me about this. Okay, so the first one I would do is if I had a product idea, and I thought I could build it, I'd probably have a friendly cup of coffee with some early stage seed venture person and just say, hey, I want to pick your brain. I have an idea. I'm working on it. I'd like a little feedback. I think if I can make it go, I'd love to have you there. So I think getting an outside validation, or let someone else ask you tough questions about what business you're in and what the market's like, of these deals getting funded. That would be a really good first one. The second would be to, boy, I think the second would be trying to carve out how much time you can give this idea of starting your company and the product. I mean, are you committing a year to this? You got enough money to live a year and not do anything? The time allocation to really be able to vet out your business, to write the code if that encases it. So that, and being prepared to go the distance. If you're going to go the first step, you need to go the distance. So that, having someone to talk to that might become a partner. And the third would be, boy, just from my experience, it's like, if you have a family or a relationship or something, everyone needs to be on board, maybe even mom and dad, I don't know, but I think you really got to understand the stress and the strain of working. I mean, when I was in the startup, we used to have staff meetings at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Yeah, we had 6-day work. We had 6-day work weeks, 2 p.m. And that was after we took a 10% pay cut. So, I mean, it was hard. I mean, I had Sundays off for my 2 sons. That was it. And it puts a lot of stress on that. So you got to go the long run here. So your family, your time and commitment, and having some outsiders to help mentor you or guide you or ask tough questions. Those would be, you got to answer those 3. And if you're single, the third one doesn't matter, but that just is not the case for most entrepreneurs these days.
What do you, one bonus one that I want to ask you, you think a business plan is important?
I believe a business plan composed of 10 slides with very little writing on them would suffice to raise a seed round. I don't really need any financials. I mean, if your investor doesn't already know what the financials look like, then you already got a problem from day one. I mean, after looking at 1,000 business plans, unless it's in a field you know nothing about, but you know what it costs to build software and host it on AWS and everything else. So the financials are, for VC, that's not important. We don't believe.
But they always ask that question.
Yeah, well, it's just a character test. You know what in the hell you're doing. but if you've seen 100 of these businesses in the last couple of years, you know exactly what the financials look like. It's just a test to see whether you have enough common sense to put a set of financials where everything, there's nothing, like your expenses never go up and your revenue doubles every year. Just more common sense shit. But it's just a character test.
I got you. Well, I appreciate you coming on a Saturday, and I'm going to have you back to talk about deal terms and how they work, because that's a whole nother element of venture capital for both the venture capitalist and the entrepreneur that most people never understood. In fact, if it,
yeah,
I mean,
that very complicated. And I would say, as a young VC, made lots of mistakes. All of us did, just bad term sheets and bad documents. That's one place to get trained up. I agree.
I mean, we all made mistakes on that. And you introduced me to Harry Glazer in the early days, who taught me, first thing he actually taught me about deal terms wasn't about deal terms. It was never run out of money. And I thought that was an interesting piece of feedback that really scared the living crap out of me at the moment. But that is the truth. So we'll have you back, talk about how term sheets work, how deal terms work, what they are, and why they exist, as importantly, right? Not as a gotcha. So thanks a lot, man.
Yep. Take care.